Imagine this: a first date, a perfect dinner, and a charming man with a dark secret that could change everything. But wait, there's a twist that'll make you rethink what you thought was just a casual night out. You're about to hear a story that's packed with suspense, mystery, and shocking reveals that'll keep you hooked. But before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Dropping a like and a comment is the least you can do to show some love. And like we always say, even if some stories seem the same, they ain't never the same when I'm the one telling them. The movie starts in a dark, quiet room. Violet is trembling, pleading with her abusive husband Blake to stop, but Blake enjoys her suffering too much. He points a gun at her, blaming her for everything. Coldly, he hands her the weapon and tells her to pull the trigger. Violet's hand shakes as she stares at the gun, caught in a nightmare with no way out. Time jumps. Years later, Blake is dead, and Violet has fled to Chicago with her young son Toby. Now she works as a therapist, helping others trapped in the same dark world she once was. Each session is a lifeline, a reminder to those she helps, and to herself, that they are not alone. Violet hears the doorbell ring and opens the door to find a man claiming to be from the electric company, asking if he can read the meters. She agrees, but something feels off. For the past 3 months, Violet has been talking to a man named Henry on a dating app. Henry is a photographer at the mayor's office, and today's the big day. They're finally meeting in person. As Violet reads his messages, she's suddenly jolted by the sound of Toby's toy truck rolling across the floor. Inside, she finds a note that reads, "Find me. The game of hide-and-seek has taken a strange turn." Her sister, Jen, arrives just as Violet is trying to get ready for her date. After a quick greeting, Jen gives Violet's outfit a disapproving look, making Violet second-guess everything: her clothes, her date, even her decision to step outside at all. Violet is nervous. It's the first time she's leaving Toby alone, a feeling she can't shake. Jen steps in, reminding her that she deserves to be happy, and not everyone is like her abusive ex. With a little help from her sister, Violet picks a prettier dress and starts to feel a spark of confidence. As she heads downstairs, Toby looks up at her and says, "You look pretty." Violet smiles, heart full, and thanks him. Before leaving, she makes sure to remind Jen to get Toby to bed by 8 and mentions the cameras around the house, just in case she needs to check in. Violet arrives at Palette, a fancy restaurant at the top of a skyscraper. As she steps into the elevator, her phone buzzes with a message from Henry. He'll be late and wants her to wait at the bar. At the reception desk, Violet confirms her reservation, and the hostess helps her with her coat before pointing her to the bar area. Just as she steps in, Violet's phone buzzes with a message from Jen, distracting her for a moment. She bumps into a man but quickly apologizes, then takes a seat at the bar, ordering a drink. The bartender gives her a compliment on her outfit. Violet laughs, saying her sister made her wear it and that it's her first date in a long time. A few moments later, an elderly man approaches, thinking Violet is his blind date, Diane. Violet gently corrects him, and they both laugh as he admits it's his first blind date ever. They chat briefly about how strange and complicated dating has become these days. Soon after, a man in a suit sits next to Violet and, after a short pause, asks her what her favorite song is. Before she can answer, the bartender steps in, telling the man, Phil, that Violet is waiting for someone. Phil doesn't seem bothered by this at all. He keeps pushing, and Violet, a bit annoyed, finally says, "Baby Shark." Phil looks disappointed but smiles weakly and walks away. The bartender then explains that Phil is their new piano player and a bit of a flirt. A few minutes later, the elderly man's real date arrives. She looks disappointed by his appearance, and Violet watches the awkward moment with a quiet smile. Checking her phone, she hopes for an update from Jen about Toby, but instead, she gets a notification from the DigiDrop app. It's just a meme, so she ignores it. Then, another one pops up. Feeling curious, Violet looks around the room to see who might be sending them. That's when she finally sees Henry. He walks up to her, apologizing for being late. Violet smiles and tells him it's no big deal. Together, they walk to their reserved table. The view from the top is absolutely stunning, with huge windows giving them a perfect look at the city lights below. As they sit down, Henry explains he had to bring his camera bag because work kept him late. Violet asks if it's okay to keep her phone on the table since she wants to check on Toby, who's being babysat by her sister. Henry nods, saying it's no problem at all. Henry then pulls out a small hockey puck with the Chicago team logo on it, telling Violet it's for Toby. Violet is genuinely touched by the thoughtful gift. Just then, their server Matt arrives at the table, practically bouncing with excitement. He announces it's his first day and starts telling them all about his life in a rambling, non-stop story. Seeing the polite but awkward looks on their faces, he finally stops and asks for their order. Henry starts by ordering a drink. Just then, Violet gets another drop on her phone. She shows Henry and tells him someone has been sending her random memes through DigiDrop. Henry shrugs and says it happens to him too, especially on trains. He figures it's someone close by since DigiDrop only works within 50 feet. As they look around, Henry spots an elderly couple nearby and jokes that they don't even look like they could unlock an iPad. Violet adds that the older man, Richard, is actually here on a blind date. They both glance around and spot a group of well-dressed prom kids, guessing it's probably one of them playing a prank. Violet's phone vibrates again, but this time it's a message from Jen. Violet smiles and shows Henry a picture of Toby, but almost immediately, another meme drop comes through. This one is disturbing and includes her name. Violet's smile fades as she says someone knows who she is. Henry tries to reassure her, saying that on the DigiDrop app, names are visible to everyone. But he admits one thing feels off. He can see the profiles of everyone in the restaurant on the app, so he can't guess who the anonymous dropper could be. He excuses himself and uses a distance-checking app to scan the area. When he returns, he tells her the kitchen and lobby are out of range, which means whoever is sending these drops is definitely in the dining room. Violet gets another message and shows it to Henry. Just as their drinks arrive, Violet gets a chilling notification from the dropper. It tells her to check the security cameras at her house. She opens the app, and what she sees makes her heart stop. A masked man is inside her home. Henry notices her face go pale and asks if everything is okay. Violet quickly excuses herself, saying she needs to make a call to Jen. She steps away and dials 911, but before the call can go through, she receives another message from the dropper. Your phone is cloned. Panicking, Violet bumps into the same man from the lobby. She mutters an apology and hurries into the women's restroom. As she's about to ask the women there for help, her phone suddenly buzzes again. The dropper has sent another message, somehow already knowing what she was about to do. Desperate, Violet borrows some eyeliner from one of the women and writes, "Help," on her hand, but the women don't seem to understand what she's trying to say. After they leave, Violet scans the bathroom and notices a small, discreet hearing device tucked under the sink. She returns to her table, shaken but trying to compose herself. She apologizes to Henry for walking out so abruptly and tells him this is her first time leaving Toby alone since he was born. Henry gives her a sympathetic look and says he understands completely. Then, Violet glances at the table lamp. Hidden inside it, just like in the restroom, is another hearing device. When Violet messages and asks who he is, the dropper playfully replies that he could be their waiter, the hostess, or anyone. Henry turns to Violet, noticing her discomfort. He asks if someone is still sending her drops. Violet lies and says it's just the height making her nauseous. Understanding, Henry calls out to Matt and asks if they can change tables. After checking with the hostess, Matt returns and tells them that another table is available. However, the dropper threatens Violet. Violet raises her voice, getting the attention of both men, and says she'd like to go back to their original table since Henry specifically reserved it for the view. On the way back, Violet notices security cameras in every corner. She realizes this is how the dropper is tracking her every move. Later, the hostess stops by to check on them. She also mentions that Henry specifically called to request this table. Henry denies it, saying he only asked for any table with a good view. Then the server arrives to take their order. Violet discreetly messages the dropper, asking what he wants. The dropper replies, "Get the SD card from Henry's camera." Violet orders a salad, and Henry chooses the filet. Thinking fast, Violet hides her watch in her bag. She pretends to have lost it and asks Henry to check with the hostess. Without complaining, Henry heads off to ask. Taking her chance, Violet quickly gets on her knees, grabs Henry's camera, and finds compromising photos of the mayor, along with financial statements that suggest corruption in the mayor's office. She removes the SD card and returns to the table just as Henry comes back, apologizing that the hostess had no information about the missing watch. Violet suggests she might have left her watch in the restroom and excuses herself to go check. In the restroom, she smashes the SD card and flushes it down the toilet. Then she messages the dropper, telling him to get the man out of her house. To her shock, the dropper tells her to open the towel dispenser. Inside, she finds a vial of poison. He orders her to pour it into Henry's drink. Horrified, she refuses, but the dropper coldly reminds her that she's already killed a man before. Leaving the restroom, Violet heads to the lobby and asks the hostess to check who had originally reserved their table. She explains she doesn't want to take someone else's reservation. The hostess confirms that it was Henry who made the reservation. After the hostess walks away, Violet tries calling 911 from the hotel phone, but the call doesn't go through. She then attempts the abuse hotline, but the dropper intercepts and tells her to stop. Suddenly, she notices the man she had bumped into earlier walking around the hotel. She confronts him, and he claims he's waiting for his sister. Still suspicious, she leaves him and returns to the table, only to find Henry paying the check. He tells her he understands that her son comes first and says she should go home. To stop him, she kisses him and pleads with him to stay. He agrees. The waiter returns to their table, and Violet hears the Baby Shark song playing on the piano. She reveals to Henry that she requested it earlier. Quickly, she takes out some money, scribbles 2 hostages and call cops on it, and gives it to the waiter, telling him it's a tip for the pianist. Moments later, the pianist, Phil, receives the tip. Henry excuses himself for a business call. Violet watches as Phil looks at her, seems to make a call, but then resumes playing the piano. Henry returns, and the waiter brings their food, salad and filet. Then Violet notices the money, intended for Phil, is inside her salad. She texts the dropper an apology. Just then, Phil collapses. Violet quickly checks her security camera feed and sees Jen being knocked out while the man locks Toby in a room. Moments later, Phil gets up and heads toward the elevator. The dropper messages Violet saying, "Phil is dead." She notices an ambulance outside the hotel. Violet suggests doing shots to lighten the mood, and Henry agrees. He flags down Matt, but he's busy, so Violet volunteers to go herself. In her rush, she drops her bag, and Henry sees the watch inside. Violet reaches the bar and orders 2 tequila shots. Just as she's about to pour the poison into one of the drinks, the dropper instructs her to spike the drink at her table. The bartender then asks if she would like lemon wedges, but Violet declines and takes the shots back to their table. Wordlessly, Henry hands her the watch. Faking surprise, Violet asks where he found it. Unbothered, Henry replies, "In your bag." Then, with concern, he asks, "Are you all right?" Just then, Violet's mind flashes back to her ex-husband yelling at her, pointing a gun at Toby, and his cries echoing through the room. Violet is snapped back to reality when Henry calls her name. She then asks Henry why he messaged her on the dating app, knowing that she is a widow with a son. With a wistful tone, Henry explains that he was close to deleting the app because everyone on there was pretending to be perfect, which he knew wasn't true. Then, Henry came across Violet's profile and explained that she seemed kind, genuine, and like a good mom. But Violet argues that she's a bad mother because she stayed with her abusive husband even after Toby was born, and Toby saw things no child should ever witness. Henry points out that she got out, and that's all that matters. But Violet counters, saying she didn't get out. She's still trapped in the room where her husband tried to kill her child, and she did nothing. Henry shares that he was in a similar situation before, where the person he trusted most turned out to be a bad person. He tells her that her ex-husband didn't take her hope because she's here now, just like he is. Violet, with a small smile, acknowledges his words. She then tells him she forgot the lemon wedges. Henry volunteers to get them from the bar. At the bar, when Henry asks for lemon wedges, the bartender questions if she changed her mind. Suspicious, Henry lies and replies, "Yes." Meanwhile, Violet notices the man from earlier staring at her, and then she spikes Henry's drink. When Henry returns to their table, they toast to their first date. Violet deliberately spills wine on Henry, and he quickly excuses himself to go wash up in the bathroom. Violet decides to confront the man, but just as she approaches, his sister arrives. The bartender returns and asks if her date is going well. Violet replies that everything is fine. She then gestures toward the woman who just arrived and asks if she comes here often, mentioning that she feels like she's seen her before. The bartender confirms that the woman is a regular and usually sits at the table Richard is occupying now. She also adds that Richard has been a creep, staring at Violet throughout his entire date. Now realizing Richard is the dropper, Violet approaches him with the shots. He asks her to take a seat and have a shot. She does. Richard then reveals that he's been hired by the mayor's office to get rid of Henry and the incriminating SD card. Violet threatens to call the police as she has evidence that Richard has sent the drops, but Richard dismissively replies that drops are untraceable. Then he drops a bombshell. Henry is actually an FBI informant. Violet, shaken, asks why he chose her. Richard replies that Violet has a reputation for having killed her husband. Since the court couldn't find her guilty, they thought she'd be the perfect candidate given her track record. Violet denies killing her husband, but her mind flashes back to the moment when Blake took his own life, making everything even more complicated. Richard then reveals that because of her stupidity, Phil had to die. Just then, the waiter serves panna cotta for Richard. He boastfully mentions that the footage of her spiking Henry's drink is recorded. A moment later, Henry arrives from the washroom. Richard cheerfully introduces himself, mentioning that he met Violet at the bar, and offers the spiked drink to Henry. Henry hesitates, but Violet encourages him to drink, which he does. Violet then asks Henry to wait at their table, promising to explain everything. She then asks Richard to get the man out of her house. Richard makes a call, then enthusiastically starts eating the dish. Violet opens up about how her ex-husband always took her to a restaurant and bought her a panna cotta as an apology dinner. She would pretend everything was fine, just as she pretended to spike the shot when, instead, she spiked the panna cotta. Richard, furious, pulls a gun on her, but Henry shields her, taking the shot meant for Violet. The bartender also comes to her defense, but is violently stabbed in the process. Richard then calls the man to kill Violet's child. Violet notices the cracks in the glass window and throws the hockey puck at it. The air suction causes Richard to fall to his death while she dangles for her life. Luckily, Henry arrives just in time and saves her. After making sure Henry is okay, Violet grabs her phone and sees that the man is heading toward her son's room. After getting the car keys from Henry, she calls Jen and warns her about the intruder. Meanwhile, Jen and Toby manage to hide in a room, but the intruder breaks in and shoots Jen. Just as the situation seems dire, Violet arrives, grabs a knife, and stabs the intruder. A violent fight ensues, but in the end, Violet spots her son's toy truck heading towards her, and inside, it is a gun. She shoots the intruder, ending the threat. Jen, though wounded by the gunshot, manages to get downstairs. A few days later at the hospital, Henry learns that the mayor has been arrested in connection with embezzlement. Violet arrives at Henry's hospital room, and Jen, though recovering, is healing nicely. The two then decide to go on a second date. What would you do if you were Violet? Caught in a deadly web of mystery and danger with your son's life on the line, would you take the risk to fight back? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd love to know what you think.